My name is Dorothy, and I'm 53 years old. Last Tuesday, I came home from my weekly grocery run expecting to collapse into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea. Instead, I opened my front door to find absolutely nothing. My living room was completely empty. Every piece of furniture had vanished. My couch, my coffee table, my grandmother's antique rocking chair, even the television stand. Gone. For a moment, I thought I'd walked into the wrong house. But there on the kitchen counter sat a handwritten note from my son Kevin. Mom, I borrowed your furniture for a down payment. I'm in Paris with Amber. We deserve this. My phone started ringing. International number. Before we dive into this nightmare, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story hits close to home, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real family drama stories. You won't believe how much worse this gets, and I promise you'll want to see how this ends. Walking through my house felt like touring a crime scene. Every room told the same devastating story. The dining room where Kevin and I had shared countless meals was stripped bare. The antique dining set my late husband Gerald had surprised me with for our 20th anniversary was gone. In the family room, even the end tables had disappeared, leaving only rectangular indentations in the carpet where heavy furniture had sat for years. Only my bedroom remained untouched, as if Kevin had drawn some arbitrary line about where his theft would end. I picked up Kevin's note with trembling hands and read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood. The handwriting was definitely his, that same sloppy scrawl I'd seen on homework assignments throughout his childhood. He'd written it so casually, as if he were leaving a message about borrowing my car. Mom, I borrowed your furniture for a down payment. Amber and I found the perfect apartment in Paris. The moving company said everything was worth about $8,000. We deserve this fresh start after everything we've been through. I'll pay you back someday. Love, Kevin. $8,000. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. That dining set alone was worth $5,000. Gerald had saved for months to buy it, working overtime at the factory to afford something special for our milestone anniversary. The antique secretary desk in the corner had belonged to my grandmother, passed down through 3 generations. You can't put a price on family history, but Kevin apparently had. The memories came flooding back as I stood in my hollow house. I'd worked 3 jobs to put Kevin through college. Mornings at the diner, afternoons cleaning office buildings, evenings tutoring neighborhood kids. I'd sold Gerald's beloved vintage car collection after his heart attack to pay off Kevin's student loans. $20,000 in classic Chevrolets, gone to cover Kevin's business degree. He'd promised me then that it was an investment in our family's future. I'll take care of you when I graduate, Mom, he'd said, holding my hands as we signed the paperwork at the bank. That was 3 years ago. Since graduation, Kevin had been nothing but disappointment and excuses. First, he couldn't find a job in his field. Then he found one but quit after 2 months because his boss was impossible to work with. Then another job, another quick departure. I'd been covering his portion of my mortgage for 18 months while he figured things out. The late payment notices had been piling up for weeks. I walked to the living room window and peered through the blinds. Mrs. Patterson from next door was watering her roses, pointedly avoiding eye contact. Mr. Thompson was checking his mailbox for the 3rd time today, glancing nervously toward my house. They'd seen the moving truck. They'd watched strangers carry my life away piece by piece, and neither had called to check on me. The shame burned in my chest. My own neighbors thought I was having my belongings repossessed. The phone kept ringing. That international number. I finally answered on the 7th call, my voice barely a whisper. Hello? Mom, thank God. I was worried when you didn't pick up. Kevin's voice sounded distant and echo-laden, clearly calling through some internet service. In the background, I could hear traffic and what sounded like cafe music. I know you're probably surprised about the furniture situation, but I can explain everything. Surprised. As if he'd rearranged the living room, not stolen everything I owned. Kevin, what have you done? This is my home. These were my things, our family's things. Mom, listen to me. You don't need all that stuff. You're one person rattling around in that big house with rooms full of furniture you never use. Amber helped me see that you were basically hoarding. We took inventory, and you had 4 chairs in the dining room but you eat at the kitchen counter. You had 2 couches in the living room, but you always sat in the same spot on one of them. The logic was so twisted it made me dizzy. Those chairs were for family dinners. The couches were so people could visit and feel comfortable. Just because I live alone doesn't mean I don't deserve to have a properly furnished home. But Mom, think about it practically. We needed this money for our future. Amber and I have been planning this move to Paris for months. She has this amazing opportunity to work at an art gallery, and I can finally pursue my photography seriously. You always said family helps family. This is your chance to help us build something beautiful. The manipulation was breathtaking. He'd taken my own words about family loyalty and twisted them into justification for theft. Kevin, you stole from me. You took my belongings without permission and sold them. That's not family helping family, that's a crime. Don't be so dramatic, Mom. It's not stealing when it's family. Besides, I left you the essentials. Your bed, your dresser, the kitchen stuff. You have everything you actually need. I sank onto my bare kitchen floor, the cold tiles shocking against my legs. This was the child I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for. The son who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and tell me I was the best mom in the world. Somewhere along the way, that sweet child had become this stranger who could justify robbing his own mother. I need you to bring everything back, Kevin. I can't afford to replace any of this. I'm already behind on the mortgage, and now I have nothing. I can't do that, Mom. We've already spent the money on our apartment deposit and plane tickets. But look, this could be good for both of us. You've been saying you want to downsize. Maybe this is the universe's way of forcing you to simplify your life. The universe. As if cosmic forces had conspired to help my son steal my dining room set. I hung up the phone and cried on my kitchen floor until my neighbor Helen Rodriguez knocked on my door, holding a casserole and wearing an expression of deep concern. She'd been through something similar with her own son 5 years ago. That was the first time someone told me I wasn't alone in this nightmare. Kevin called every day from Paris, and each conversation revealed new layers of his twisted reasoning. He'd clearly rehearsed his talking points with Amber, because his justifications became more sophisticated each time we spoke. On Wednesday, he explained that he was actually doing me a favor by forcing me to confront my attachment issues. On Thursday, he suggested I was being selfish for wanting to keep furniture I didn't really need when his future was at stake. By Friday, he was questioning my mental state. Mom, I'm worried about you, he said during our 5th conversation that week. I could hear the smile in his voice, the practiced concern. You're getting very fixated on material possessions. It's not healthy for someone your age. Maybe you should talk to someone about this obsession with stuff. The gaslighting was sophisticated and deliberate. He'd learned these techniques somewhere, probably from Amber, who I was beginning to understand was the architect of this entire scheme. When she got on the phone that Friday, her voice dripped with fake sympathy. Dorothy, I hope you know that Kevin agonized over this decision. We both did. But sometimes tough love is the only way to help someone you care about. You were drowning in clutter, living in the past instead of embracing your future. We've given you an opportunity to start fresh. Amber spoke about my life like she'd known me for years instead of the handful of times we'd met. She described my furniture as outdated and depressing, my house as a shrine to dead memories. According to her, my grandmother's antique desk was just taking up space, and Gerald's favorite armchair was morbid for me to keep. She painted herself and Kevin as liberators, freeing me from the burden of my possessions. Besides, she continued, Kevin told me about your money problems. Instead of selling this stuff yourself and actually getting fair value for it, you were just going to lose everything when the bank forecloses anyway. We saved you the embarrassment. The cruelty was breathtaking. They'd researched my financial situation, planned this theft around my vulnerabilities, and now they were presenting it as mercy. I learned later that Kevin had been intercepting my mail for months, reading my bank statements and mortgage notices. He knew exactly how precarious my situation was, and he'd exploited that knowledge. During that same call, Kevin's college friend Marcus reached out with what seemed like a warning. Mrs. Dorothy, I think you should know that Kevin's been bragging about his Paris trip to everyone. He's posting pictures of expensive restaurants and hotel rooms on social media. I don't think he's planning to pay you back anytime soon. Marcus seemed genuinely concerned, telling me about Kevin's gambling habit that had gotten worse after graduation. He owes money to some serious people, Mrs. Dorothy. Like, dangerous people. I think he may have sold your stuff to pay off debts, not for any Paris apartment. At the time, I thought Marcus was trying to help me understand the scope of Kevin's problems. I felt grateful that at least one of his friends still had a conscience. I didn't realize until much later that Marcus was part of the scheme, feeding me information designed to make me more sympathetic to Kevin's situation and less likely to pursue legal action. Helen Rodriguez became my lifeline during those first terrible days. She'd lived through her own son's betrayal 5 years earlier when he'd emptied her savings account to fund a cross-country move with his girlfriend. She understood the particular agony of being victimized by your own child, the way it shattered not just your sense of security but your understanding of reality itself. The hardest part isn't the money, Helen told me as we sat in her living room, sharing tea and tissues. It's accepting that the person who's supposed to protect you is the one who hurt you. You spend years wondering what you did wrong, what you could have done differently. But Dorothy, this isn't about bad parenting. This is about Kevin making choices that have nothing to do with the mother you were. Helen helped me start documenting everything. She insisted I print out Kevin's social media posts showing his expensive lifestyle, screenshot our text message conversations, and keep detailed records of every phone call. If you decide to fight this legally, you'll need evidence, she explained. And even if you don't, you'll need this documentation for your own sanity when Kevin tries to rewrite history. That weekend, I discovered the true scope of Kevin's planning when I tried to access our joint savings account. The account we'd opened years ago for emergencies, the one I'd been slowly depleting to cover his share of my mortgage payments. Kevin had cleaned it out completely, withdrawing the remaining $3,000 the same day the movers came. When I called the bank in a panic, they calmly explained that Kevin had full access to the account and every right to withdraw the funds. But he stole furniture from my house and sold it, I protested to the bank manager. This money is probably from that theft. Ma'am, we can't get involved in family disputes about furniture, came the patient reply. The account withdrawal was completely legal. If you believe a crime has been committed, you'll need to file a police report. A police report against my own son. The words felt impossible in my mouth. But as I hung up the phone and stared at my empty living room, I began to understand that Kevin had already declared war on me. He'd just hidden it behind smiles and manipulative phone calls from Paris. The question wasn't whether our relationship could survive this betrayal. The question was whether I could survive it at all. Monday morning brought the call I'd been dreading for months. Jennifer Walsh from Midwest Mortgage Services spoke in the crisp, professional tone of someone who delivered bad news for a living. Mrs. Dorothy, I'm calling about your account which is now 90 days past due. We need to schedule a meeting to discuss foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. The word hit like a physical blow. Ms. Walsh, I understand I'm behind, but I'm working on getting caught up. My son was helping with payments, but there's been a family emergency. Mrs. Dorothy, your account shows no payments received in 4 months. The total amount due including late fees is now $8,437. Without a significant payment within 10 days, we'll have no choice but to begin legal action. $8,000. Almost exactly what Kevin claimed my furniture was worth. The coincidence felt like another slap in the face. I'd lost my belongings, my financial security, and my ability to catch up on my mortgage all in one devastating week. After hanging up, I sat in my empty kitchen and tried to calculate how many years of working at my part-time job at the local library it would take to earn $8,000 after taxes and living expenses. The math was hopeless. That afternoon brought another shock when I tried to check my credit card balance online. Account suspended. When I called the customer service number, I learned that Kevin had somehow gained access to my online banking and credit card accounts. The representative explained that large cash advances had been taken using my cards, maxing out both my credit lines. Ma'am, these transactions show valid online access using your login credentials. Were you aware that someone else had this information? I wasn't aware. I'd been careful with my passwords, or so I thought. But Kevin was tech-savvy and had lived in my house on and off for months after college. He'd had plenty of opportunities to watch me log into accounts or find where I kept my password information written down. I need to report this as fraud, I told the representative. Ma'am, the access appears to be from someone who had legitimate knowledge of your account information. If this was a family member, this becomes a civil matter rather than fraud. You'd need to file a police report and potentially pursue this through family court. Every phone call led to the same conclusion. Kevin had been meticulous in covering his legal tracks. He'd used access I'd given him, taken money from accounts he was authorized to use, and sold property from a house where he'd been a frequent guest. Technically, much of what he'd done existed in legal gray areas that would be difficult and expensive to prosecute. The breaking point came when I visited my bank to understand how Kevin had gained so much access to my accounts. Julie Martinez, the branch manager, pulled up my records with obvious discomfort. Mrs. Dorothy, I see the problem. Your son has power of attorney authorization on your accounts. Power of attorney. I stared at her in confusion. That's impossible. I never gave him power of attorney. Julie turned her computer screen toward me, showing a document with my signature. This was filed 6 months ago. You signed this form giving Kevin limited power of attorney for financial matters. Looking at the signature, I remembered. Kevin had brought me a stack of paperwork when I was recovering from a minor surgery last winter. He'd explained it as insurance stuff, to make sure he could handle my bills if I was ever hospitalized again. I'd been groggy from pain medication and trusting of my son. I'd signed without reading carefully. This document gives him broad access to your accounts, Julie explained gently. Legally, everything he's done with your money has been authorized. The sophistication of Kevin's planning was becoming clear. This wasn't an impulsive decision to steal my furniture. He'd been setting up this theft for months, manipulating me into signing legal documents that would give him the access he needed. The surgery had been an opportunity, and my trust in him had been a weapon. That evening, my neighbor Helen helped me contact a legal aid attorney named David Chen who specialized in elder abuse cases. During our phone consultation, David explained the harsh reality of my situation. Mrs. Dorothy, what your son has done is legally complex. The power of attorney complicates any criminal charges, and the fact that he lived in your home gives him certain claims about the furniture. This will be an expensive fight with uncertain outcomes. But he stole from me, I protested. He cleaned out my accounts and sold my belongings without permission. Morally, you're absolutely right, David agreed. But legally, we'll need to prove that he exceeded his power of attorney authority and acted against your interests. That's possible, but it requires extensive documentation and can take months or years to resolve. The consultation fee alone was $200 I didn't have. David was kind enough to waive it after hearing my story, but he was clear about the costs involved in pursuing Kevin legally. Retainer fees, court costs, expert witnesses, it could easily cost more money than I might ever recover. I hung up feeling more hopeless than ever. Kevin had outmaneuvered me at every turn, using my love and trust against me to create a nearly bulletproof theft. But Helen wasn't ready to give up. Dorothy, we're not dealing with a criminal mastermind here. We're dealing with a spoiled brat who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Spoiled brats always make mistakes. She was right. Kevin's first mistake was his arrogance. His second mistake was underestimating his mother's determination to fight back. I might not have been able to afford fancy lawyers or private investigators, but I had something Kevin had forgotten about. I had time, patience, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The call from my sister Beverly came on a Thursday morning, her voice heavy with concern and something else I couldn't identify. Dorothy, honey, I think we need to talk. Kevin's been calling me, and I'm worried about you. Beverly lived 2 hours away in Springfield and we spoke maybe once a month, usually about holiday plans or family birthdays. For Kevin to be calling her regularly was unusual and immediately suspicious. I invited her over for coffee, forgetting momentarily that I had no furniture to offer her a comfortable seat. When Beverly arrived that Saturday, she brought her husband Frank and an expression of forced sympathy that made my stomach clench. They both hugged me a little too tightly, spoke a little too gently, and kept exchanging meaningful looks over my head. Beverly had brought a notebook. Honey, Kevin's told us about some concerning things, she began, settling onto one of the folding chairs Helen had loaned me. He says you've been acting confused lately, making poor decisions with money, forgetting important things. He's worried you might be developing dementia. The word hit like ice water. Dementia. Kevin had been telling my family that I was losing my mind. Beverly, that's ridiculous. I'm perfectly fine. Kevin stole my furniture and emptied my accounts. That's not confusion, that's theft. Frank leaned forward with practiced compassion. Dorothy, we know this is hard to hear, but Kevin showed us some photos. You were wearing the same clothes for several days in a row. Your house was cluttered and disorganized. He found spoiled food in your refrigerator and unpaid bills stuffed in drawers. Photos. Kevin had been documenting what he would later present as evidence of my incompetence. Those clothes were my gardening outfit, worn for yard work over several weekends. The cluttered house was normal lived-in mess, not hoarding. The spoiled food was a single container of leftovers I'd forgotten about, and the unpaid bills were Kevin's portion of my mortgage payments that he'd been ignoring for months. But Kevin had photographed these moments out of context, creating a narrative of decline and confusion. He'd built a case against my mental state to justify his theft and manipulation. Dorothy, we think Kevin might be right about you needing some help, Beverly continued, consulting her notebook. We've been researching some very nice assisted living facilities. There's one in Springfield where Frank's mother lived that has excellent care and social activities. Assisted living. They wanted me to sell my house and move into a facility based on Kevin's manufactured evidence. I could see the entire plan now. Kevin would get my house, claiming he was protecting me from myself. My belongings were already gone, sold to fund his Paris adventure. Now they wanted to package me up and ship me off so Kevin could complete his theft without interference. I'm not moving anywhere, I said firmly. I'm not confused, I'm not incompetent, and I'm not giving up my home. Kevin robbed me, and instead of helping me, you're helping him cover it up. Beverly's expression shifted from sympathy to frustration. Dorothy, you're being paranoid. Kevin loves you. He's trying to protect you from making more poor choices. He told us about the money you've been sending to internet scammers. Internet scammers. Another lie, but a clever one. Kevin knew I'd been struggling financially and had been worried about online fraud after reading news stories. He'd twisted my caution into evidence of gullibility. That evening, after Beverly and Frank left with promises to check on me regularly, I called Helen in tears. She came over immediately with a bottle of wine and a fury that matched my own. Dorothy, this is elder abuse at its most sophisticated, she said, pacing my empty living room. Kevin's not just stealing from you financially, he's stealing your reputation, your autonomy, and your family relationships. This is psychological warfare. Helen helped me understand that Kevin's plan was much bigger than simple theft. He was systematically destroying my credibility so that when the house went into foreclosure, when I couldn't pay my bills, when I ended up homeless or institutionalized, everyone would say it was because of my failing mind rather than his deliberate sabotage. The next week brought the crushing revelation that Kevin's manipulation had reached even deeper. I discovered that my longtime neighbor Mrs. Patterson had been receiving regular calls from Kevin for months. He'd been reporting my strange behavior to her, priming her to view my normal activities as signs of mental decline. Mrs. Patterson called me over the fence one afternoon, her voice careful and condescending. Dorothy, dear, I've been meaning to ask. Have you been feeling all right lately? Kevin mentioned you've been having some memory issues. The betrayal was staggering. Kevin had turned my own neighborhood into surveillance agents, teaching them to interpret my daily life as symptoms of dementia. When I worked in my garden early in the morning, it became confused wandering. When I brought in my mail later in the day, it became forgetting important tasks. When I had friends over for dinner, it became agitation and social confusion. Kevin had weaponized my entire support system against me, and the most heartbreaking part was that people were participating willingly because they thought they were helping. Beverly, Frank, Mrs. Patterson, even my mail carrier had been trained to see me as a confused elderly woman who needed protection from herself. But Kevin's greatest betrayal was still to come. That Friday, I returned from my weekly grocery shopping to find Amber sitting in my driveway in a rented car. She wasn't supposed to be back from Paris for weeks, but there she was, looking perfectly composed and holding an envelope of what looked like legal documents. "Dorothy, we need to talk," she said, getting out of the car with the confident stride of someone who believed she held all the cards. "Kevin sent me back to handle some business arrangements. He thinks it's better if I deal with you directly since you've been getting so emotional with him on the phone." Emotional. I'd been devastated, heartbroken, and furious, but Kevin was framing my natural reactions to his theft as evidence of instability. Amber walked past me into my house like she belonged there, settling onto one of Helen's borrowed chairs and spreading papers across my kitchen table. "Here's what's going to happen," she announced, as casual as if she were ordering coffee. "Kevin's been doing research, and legally, you gave him power of attorney to manage your affairs. He's decided that you're no longer capable of living independently, so he's exercising his legal authority to make some changes." The documents were terrifying in their official appearance. Requests for guardianship, applications for assisted living facilities, authorizations to sell my property. Kevin was using the power of attorney I'd innocently signed to declare me incompetent and take control of my entire life. "Of course, we want this transition to be as comfortable as possible for you," Amber continued with fake kindness. "Kevin's found a lovely facility in Florida where you can enjoy your retirement without the stress of maintaining a house. And since you clearly can't handle your finances anymore, he'll be taking over management of all your assets." All my assets. My house, my savings, my social security, everything. Kevin wanted complete control, and he'd constructed an elaborate legal and social framework to justify taking it. The theft of my furniture had just been the opening move in a much larger game. I looked at Amber sitting in my kitchen, calmly explaining how my son planned to steal my entire life, and I felt something shift inside me. The grief and confusion of the past weeks crystallized into something harder and more focused. Kevin had made one critical error in his planning. He'd underestimated the woman who'd raised him, worked 3 jobs to support him, and sacrificed everything for his future. He was about to discover that his mother wasn't nearly as helpless as he believed. The public confrontation happened at Morrison's post office on a Tuesday morning when I spotted Kevin's distinctive red car in the parking lot. I'd been checking my mail, hoping against hope for some good news about my mortgage situation, when I saw him emerging from the building with a package under his arm. For the first time in weeks, my son was within reach, and months of rage boiled over. "Kevin," I called across the parking lot, my voice carrying further than I'd intended. Several other customers turned to watch as I approached him, my hands shaking with fury. "How dare you show your face in this town after what you've done to me?" Kevin's expression shifted quickly from surprise to embarrassment to something calculated and cold. "Mom, please keep your voice down. We can talk about this privately." "Privately? Like how you privately stole all my furniture? Like how you privately emptied my bank accounts?" My voice was getting louder, drawing more attention. "Like how you privately told everyone I have dementia." A small crowd had gathered, and Kevin played to them perfectly. His voice became gentle and concerned, the voice of a loving son dealing with a difficult parent. "Mom, you're getting confused again. I helped you sell some furniture because you needed the money. Remember? We talked about downsizing." The manipulation was flawless and public. To anyone watching, I looked like an unstable elderly woman making wild accusations against her patient, caring son. Kevin had chosen this setting deliberately, knowing I'd appear unhinged while he appeared reasonable. "You're lying," I said, but my voice was weaker now, uncertain in the face of his calm performance. "You stole from me. You left me with nothing. Mom, I think you should call Dr. Peterson about adjusting your medication. You're having another episode." Kevin turned to the watching crowd with the expression of long-suffering patience. "I'm sorry, everyone. My mother's been struggling with some memory issues lately. I should get her home." Memory issues, episodes, medication. With a few carefully chosen words in front of witnesses, Kevin had reinforced the narrative of my mental decline while positioning himself as the devoted son managing a challenging situation. Several people in the crowd nodded sympathetically, looking at me with the mixture of pity and fear that people reserve for the mentally ill. I drove home in humiliation and despair, knowing that by evening the entire town would be discussing Dorothy Walker's breakdown at the post office. Kevin had turned my justified anger into evidence supporting his lies. He'd weaponized my own emotions against me. That evening, Helen found me sitting on my kitchen floor, staring at Amber's legal documents and seriously considering whether Kevin might be right about my mental state. "Dorothy, what happened today?" I told her about the post office confrontation, about how Kevin had made me look crazy in front of half the town. "Helen, what if I am losing my mind? What if I really am confused and paranoid? Maybe Kevin's just trying to help, and I can't see it because I'm sick." Helen sat down beside me on the cold linoleum and took my hands. "Dorothy, that's called gaslighting. Kevin is deliberately making you question your own sanity because confused victims don't fight back effectively. But I need to tell you something that might help." She pulled out her phone and showed me Kevin's social media profiles, which she'd been monitoring since our first conversation about documenting evidence. "Look at this, Dorothy. Look what your confused, concerned son has been posting while you've been suffering." The photos were devastating. Kevin and Amber at expensive Parisian restaurants, toasting with champagne that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Kevin posing in front of luxury apartments, bragging about his new life in the City of Lights. Most damning of all, a video of Kevin laughing while describing how easy it had been to finally get rid of all that old junk my mom was hoarding. Junk. My grandmother's antique desk, Gerald's favorite chair, our family dining room set. Kevin had called our family history junk while spending the money from its theft on French pastries and tourist attractions. "Dorothy, does this look like the behavior of a concerned son managing his mother's decline?" Helen asked. "Or does this look like a thief celebrating his crime?" The evidence was undeniable, and it broke through the fog of self-doubt Kevin's manipulation had created. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. I was the victim of a deliberate, systematic campaign of theft and psychological abuse. The clarity was both relieving and terrifying. Helen helped me contact Sandra Martinez from the Elder Abuse Support Group, a woman who'd successfully fought back against her own son's financial exploitation 3 years earlier. Sandra arrived the next morning with a legal pad, a digital recorder, and a determination that reminded me of myself at her age. "Dorothy, first thing we're going to do is stop calling this theft," Sandra announced, settling into my kitchen with the authority of someone who'd been through this battle. "This is elder abuse, and it's a felony in this state. Second, we're going to stop worrying about family relationships. Kevin stopped treating you like family the moment he decided to rob you. Third, we're going to build a case that will put him in prison where he belongs." Sandra's directness was exactly what I needed. For weeks, I'd been thinking about this situation in terms of family dysfunction and personal betrayal. Sandra helped me understand it as crime, pure and simple. Kevin wasn't a confused young man making bad decisions. He was a criminal who'd targeted a victim he thought was too vulnerable and too loving to fight back. Over the next several hours, Sandra helped me organize every piece of evidence Helen and I had collected. Kevin's social media posts documenting his expensive lifestyle funded by theft. Text message conversations where he'd admitted to selling my belongings. The power of attorney document I'd signed under false pretenses. Bank records showing the systematic emptying of my accounts. "Dorothy, this is a strong case," Sandra said as we reviewed the evidence. Kevin got sloppy because he thought he was smarter than everyone else. He documented his own crimes and bragged about them online. Any prosecutor would love to have evidence this clear. But the real breakthrough came when Sandra suggested we research Amber's background. In my experience, this level of manipulation usually doesn't develop overnight. If Amber's been coaching Kevin, she's probably done this before. A simple internet search revealed that Amber Martinez had been arrested twice in other states for similar scams targeting elderly relatives of her boyfriends. There was a pattern of finding vulnerable young men with aging parents, gaining access to family information, and systematically exploiting elderly victims. Kevin wasn't Amber's first mark, and I wasn't her first victim. "Dorothy, you're not dealing with your son's midlife crisis," Sandra explained as we read through court records from Amber's previous arrests. "You're dealing with a professional con artist who targeted Kevin specifically because he had access to you. This is organized crime." The revelation was simultaneously devastating and empowering. Devastating because it confirmed that Kevin had been completely manipulated, that his betrayal of me was orchestrated by someone who viewed elderly women as prey. But empowering because it meant this wasn't really about our family relationship or my failures as a mother. This was about criminals who'd made the mistake of targeting someone who refused to be a victim. For the first time since walking into my empty house 3 weeks ago, I felt something other than despair. I felt angry, determined, and ready to fight. Kevin and Amber had stolen my belongings, my financial security, and my peace of mind. But they'd made one critical error in their planning. They'd forgotten that the woman who'd raised Kevin to be independent and resourceful still had those same qualities herself. And unlike Kevin, I'd learned to use them for good instead of evil. Sandra introduced me to Detective Patricia Williams from the Elder Abuse Unit on a Friday morning that would change everything. Detective Williams was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she took her job very seriously. She listened to my story without interruption, taking detailed notes and asking precise questions about dates, amounts, and documentation. "Mrs. Dorothy, what you're describing is textbook elder abuse with some sophisticated elements," Detective Williams said after reviewing my evidence. "The power of attorney manipulation, the systematic gaslighting, the coordinated family isolation, these are tactics we usually see in organized fraud cases." She was particularly interested in Amber's background and the pattern of similar crimes across state lines. If Amber Martinez is the same person who was arrested in Ohio and Michigan for identical schemes, this becomes a federal case. Interstate fraud carries much more serious penalties. Detective Williams took copies of everything Sandra and I had compiled, but she also gave me homework. "I need you to document every interaction with Kevin and Amber going forward. Record phone calls if your state allows it. Screenshot every social media post. Save every text message. We're building a criminal case, and the more evidence we have, the stronger our position becomes." The digital evidence collection became my new obsession. Helen taught me how to take screenshots on my phone and save them to a cloud storage account. Sandra showed me how to use my laptop to document Kevin's social media posts, including videos where he bragged about his financial independence and mocked people who cling to material possessions. The most damaging evidence came from Kevin's own friends, who'd started commenting on his posts with increasingly uncomfortable questions. Marcus, who I'd thought was trying to help me, had actually been feeding Kevin information about my reactions and emotional state. But other college friends were less supportive of Kevin's sudden wealth. Tyler Chen commented on a photo of Kevin's expensive hotel room, "Dude, didn't you say your mom was broke? How are you affording this?" Kevin's response was telling: family money. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions about what's really important. Family money. As if my furniture and savings had been a shared inheritance rather than theft. But Kevin's arrogance was creating evidence that would ultimately destroy him. Each dismissive comment, each casual lie, each moment of bragging built our case stronger. The breakthrough came when Amber's ex-boyfriend Ryan contacted me directly through Facebook. Ryan had seen news coverage of Amber's arrest in Michigan and recognized her photo. His message was brief but explosive. "I have information about Amber Martinez that you need to see. Can we meet?" Ryan turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his 30s who dated Amber 2 years earlier, before she'd targeted his father for a similar scam. He brought a folder of documents that revealed Amber's entire operation: fake references for rental applications, forged bank statements, detailed profiles of potential elderly victims, and most damning of all, a step-by-step manual for manipulating family members. She called it her golden years strategy, Ryan explained, showing me Amber's handwritten notes. Target elderly people through their adult children. Create financial dependency. Isolate them from other family members. Manufacture evidence of mental decline. Then use power of attorney to transfer assets legally. The manual was like reading the playbook for everything that had happened to me. Amber had literally written instructions for how to steal from elderly parents, and Kevin had followed them precisely. Even more shocking, Ryan revealed that Amber maintained detailed files on multiple potential victims across several states. "Your son wasn't her first target, Mrs. Dorothy, and you weren't her first victim. She's been running this scam for at least 5 years. The authorities in Ohio estimate she's stolen over $200,000 from elderly victims. Ryan also provided audio recordings of conversations where Amber had described her techniques for psychological manipulation. In one particularly chilling recording, she laughed while explaining how to make elderly victims question their own sanity. You have to be systematic about it. Document everything they do wrong, no matter how normal. Take pictures of them looking confused or upset. Get family members on your side early. By the time you make your move, everyone already believes the victim is incompetent. Detective Williams was fascinated by Ryan's evidence. This elevates everything to a federal case, she explained during our follow-up meeting. Amber Martinez is now looking at charges of racketeering, interstate fraud, and conspiracy. Kevin's looking at elder abuse, theft, forgery, and potentially conspiracy charges depending on how much he knew about Amber's previous crimes. But the most satisfying development came when Julie Martinez from my bank called with unexpected news. Mrs. Dorothy, our security department has been reviewing the transactions on your account. Several of the withdrawals show signs of possible fraud. We'd like to reimburse your account and file our own complaint against the individuals involved. The bank's investigation had revealed that Kevin's use of my power of attorney had exceeded the legal limits of the document I'd signed. He was authorized to help with bill paying and basic financial management, not to empty accounts for personal use. The distinction might seem minor, but legally it was the difference between authorized access and theft. We're also discovering that Mr. Kevin may have used information from your accounts to establish credit in your name without authorization, Julie continued. Our fraud department has found 3 credit card applications filed using your information but with his address and contact information. Identity theft. Kevin's crimes were multiplying as investigators dug deeper into his financial activities. Each new discovery strengthened the case against him and validated my claims about his systematic abuse. Helen and Sandra had become my war counsel, meeting at my house every evening to review evidence and plan our next moves. Helen managed our social media monitoring, tracking Kevin and Amber's online activities and documenting their continued spending of stolen money. Sandra coordinated with Detective Williams and kept me informed about legal developments. Dorothy, I need you to understand that this is no longer about getting your furniture back, Sandra explained during one of our strategy sessions. This is about making sure Kevin and Amber face serious consequences for what they've done to you and other victims. Your case could prevent them from destroying other families. The transformation from victim to prosecutor felt strange but empowering. For months, I'd been reactive, responding to Kevin's attacks and manipulations. Now I was on offense, building a case that would hold him accountable for his crimes. The scared, confused woman who'd walked into an empty house was becoming someone Kevin had never encountered before, a mother with nothing left to lose and the determination to see justice done. The final piece of our evidence collection came when Detective Williams obtained a warrant for Kevin's phone and computer records. The digital trail revealed months of planning, research into my financial situation, and detailed conversations with Amber about timing and tactics. Kevin had literally scheduled my victimization like a business project. But he'd also made the mistake that would ultimately destroy him. He'd documented everything. Every lie he'd told, every manipulation he'd planned, every dollar he'd stolen was recorded in his own digital communications. The son I'd raised to be organized and detail-oriented had created a perfect record of his crimes against me. Kevin thought his intelligence had made him untouchable. Instead, it had made him the architect of his own prosecution. The freezing of Kevin's bank accounts happened on a Tuesday morning while he was posting photos of his breakfast at a sidewalk cafe in Montmartre. Detective Williams had obtained emergency court orders based on our evidence of ongoing fraud, and federal marshals moved swiftly to lock down assets that could be traced to the theft of my belongings. I wasn't there to see Kevin's reaction, but Helen was monitoring his social media when his credit card was declined. His next post was a confused complaint about technical difficulties with his bank. The post after that was frantic. Anyone know why American banks would freeze accounts for no reason? Trying to enjoy vacation but dealing with bureaucratic nonsense. No reason. Even facing the consequences of his crimes, Kevin couldn't acknowledge what he'd done wrong. In his mind, he was the victim of bureaucratic incompetence, not the target of a criminal investigation. The delusion was almost impressive in its completeness. Amber disappeared within hours of the account freeze. Ryan had warned us she would run the moment things got difficult, and her pattern held true. Kevin's final post from Paris was a plaintive plea. Has anyone seen Amber? She went out this morning and didn't come back. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. Really worried. The woman who'd orchestrated his theft and manipulation of his own mother had abandoned him the second their crime stopped being profitable, and Kevin was worried about her well-being. The irony was perfect and tragic. Detective Williams called me that afternoon with an update that felt like vindication. Mrs. Dorothy, Kevin's attempting to return to the United States. He contacted the American embassy claiming his passport was stolen, but we've flagged his name in the system. He'll be arrested the moment he sets foot on American soil. The arrest happened at O'Hare Airport on a Thursday afternoon. Helen and I weren't there, but Detective Williams provided us with details later. Kevin had tried to enter the country using a story about vacation mishaps and lost documents, but federal agents were waiting with handcuffs and criminal charges. He seemed genuinely surprised, Detective Williams told us. Right up until the moment we read him his rights, he was insisting this was all a misunderstanding. Even after we explained the charges, he kept asking to call his mother to clarify things. Call his mother. After months of theft, manipulation, and psychological abuse, Kevin still believed I would rescue him from the consequences of his crimes. The assumption was both insulting and heartbreaking. Even facing federal charges, he expected maternal loyalty to override justice. The media attention began almost immediately. Elder abuse cases involving adult children generate significant public interest, and Kevin's case had elements that made it particularly compelling. International travel funded by theft, sophisticated manipulation tactics, and a victim who'd fought back successfully. Channel 7 News requested an interview, and Sandra encouraged me to accept. Dorothy, your story can help other families recognize these warning signs, Sandra explained. The more publicity this gets, the harder it becomes for other predators to operate. The interview was challenging but cathartic. Reporter Jennifer Walsh asked direct questions about Kevin's betrayal and my decision to pursue criminal charges against my own son. I explained that the young man in police custody wasn't really my son anymore, that the Kevin I'd raised wouldn't have been capable of such cruelty. The hardest part isn't the money he stole, I told the camera. It's accepting that the person I loved and trusted most in the world was willing to destroy my life for his convenience. But I learned that protecting yourself from abuse isn't betraying family. Sometimes prosecution is the most loving thing you can do. The interview aired during prime time and generated hundreds of responses from viewers who'd experienced similar situations. Detective Williams told me that several new elder abuse cases were reported directly as a result of my story. Other victims found the courage to come forward because they'd seen that justice was possible. Kevin's first court appearance was surreal. I attended with Helen and Sandra, sitting in the gallery while my son stood before a federal judge in an orange jumpsuit, looking confused and smaller than I remembered. His public defender explained that Kevin was cooperating with authorities and expressed remorse for his actions. Remorse. I listened carefully to Kevin's statement to the court, looking for genuine understanding of what he'd done to me. Instead, I heard self-pity and excuses. He was sorry for the misunderstanding that had resulted in his arrest. He regretted that family financial decisions had been misinterpreted as criminal acts. He hoped we could work together to resolve this unfortunate situation. Even facing federal charges, Kevin couldn't acknowledge that he'd committed crimes. He was still framing his theft and abuse as family disagreements that had gotten out of hand. The manipulation continued even in handcuffs. But the judge wasn't buying it. Mr. Kevin, you're charged with elder abuse, identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. These are serious federal crimes, not family misunderstandings. Your alleged victims include your own mother, who trusted you with access to her finances. If convicted, you're looking at significant prison time. Significant prison time. The words felt strange coming from a judge talking about my son, but they also felt like validation. The legal system was finally taking Kevin's crimes seriously. The consequences he'd been avoiding for months were finally catching up to him. The bail hearing was even more satisfying. Kevin's attorney argued that he was a low-flight risk with strong community ties, but Detective Williams testified about his pattern of deception and the international scope of his crimes. Your Honor, the defendant fled the country immediately after committing these offenses and only returned because his financial resources were frozen. He represents a clear flight risk. Bail was set at $50,000, far more than Kevin could afford in his current circumstances. He would remain in federal custody until trial, finally facing real consequences for his actions. As they led him away in chains, Kevin looked at me with an expression of hurt confusion, as if he couldn't understand why his mother wasn't rescuing him. I felt no satisfaction in seeing my son in prison clothes, but I felt enormous relief that he could no longer hurt me or other vulnerable people. For the first time in months, I was safe from Kevin's manipulation and theft. The nightmare he'd created was finally ending, and justice was beginning. The prosecution of Kevin's case moved swiftly once federal authorities took over. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Rodriguez specialized in elder abuse cases and was particularly interested in the interstate fraud elements that connected my case to Amber's previous crimes in Ohio and Michigan. Mrs. Dorothy, your son's case is part of a larger investigation into organized elder abuse, Attorney Rodriguez explained during our pre-trial meeting. We're treating this as racketeering, which carries enhanced penalties and makes it easier to recover your stolen assets. The asset recovery process had already begun. Federal agents had seized Kevin's expensive camera equipment, laptop, and other items purchased with stolen money. More importantly, they'd traced the money from my furniture sales and recovered most of it from various accounts Kevin had opened to hide his theft. We've identified approximately $12,000 in recoverable assets, Detective Williams reported. That's more than the original theft amount because it includes the money Kevin stole from your bank accounts plus interest and penalties we're imposing. $12,000. More money than I'd seen in one place since Gerald died. The financial recovery wouldn't solve all my problems, but it would save my house from foreclosure and give me a chance to rebuild my life. The trial preparation revealed even more of Kevin's deception. Prosecutors discovered that he'd been researching assisted living facilities for months before the furniture theft, pricing options and calculating costs as if my placement in a facility was a foregone conclusion. He'd also been in contact with real estate agents about selling my house, discussing market values and commission rates. Your son didn't just steal your belongings on impulse, Attorney Rodriguez explained. This was a comprehensive plan to remove you from your home and take control of all your assets. The furniture theft was just the first step in a much larger scheme. The most damaging evidence came from Kevin's own communications, which investigators had recovered from his phone and computer. Text messages with Amber showed detailed planning and cold-blooded calculation about how to manipulate me most effectively. Kevin to Amber. Mom signed the power of attorney. She was still groggy from surgery, so she didn't read it carefully. We can move to phase 2. Amber to Kevin. Perfect. Start documenting everything she does that looks confused or disorganized. Take photos. We need evidence for the competency hearing. Kevin to Amber. Got great pictures of her wearing gardening clothes 3 days in a row. Also found expired food in her fridge. Building a strong case. Reading these messages in the prosecutor's office, I felt physically sick. Kevin had been hunting me like prey, documenting my normal daily life and twisting it into evidence of mental decline. The level of betrayal was almost beyond comprehension. But the evidence that ultimately destroyed Kevin's defense came from his social media posts and financial records. Prosecutors created a timeline showing Kevin's expensive purchases in Paris alongside my growing financial desperation at home. While I was facing foreclosure and living without furniture, Kevin was posting photos of $100 dinners and luxury hotels. The contrast was devastating and undeniable. No jury could look at that timeline and believe Kevin's claims about helping his confused mother manage her finances. The evidence showed a son systematically destroying his mother's life for his own benefit. Kevin's trial lasted 3 days. I testified on the second day, describing the moment I'd walked into my empty house and the months of manipulation that followed. Kevin's attorney tried to portray me as a confused elderly woman who'd misunderstood family financial arrangements, but the evidence made that defense impossible. Attorney Rodriguez's closing argument was powerful and personal. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about the most fundamental betrayal possible. A son who targeted his own mother because he knew she loved him too much to protect herself. Kevin Walker didn't steal from a stranger, he weaponized his mother's love against her. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: elder abuse, identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. Kevin showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but I saw his attorney's shoulders slump in defeat. There had been too much evidence, too clear a pattern of deliberate crimes. Amber's capture happened 2 days after Kevin's conviction. FBI agents found her in Nevada, attempting to establish a new identity and target another family. She'd been using fake names and forged documents, but her fingerprints matched multiple databases. Her arrest made national news as part of a larger elder abuse investigation. Amber Martinez was running a sophisticated interstate fraud operation, FBI spokesperson Sarah Chen announced at a press conference. We estimate she's stolen over $500,000 from elderly victims across 6 states. Her conviction in this case will help us prosecute similar crimes nationwide. $500,000. I'd been one victim in a much larger pattern of elder abuse that had destroyed multiple families. The knowledge was horrifying but also validating. This hadn't been about my failures as a mother or Kevin's normal young adult struggles. This had been organized crime, and I'd been targeted by professionals. Kevin's sentencing hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning in November. I prepared a victim impact statement, working with Sandra and Helen to find words that captured the scope of Kevin's betrayal without sounding vindictive or bitter. Your Honor, I read to the packed courtroom, my son didn't just steal my furniture and money. He stole my sense of safety, my trust in family, and my faith in the goodness I thought I'd raised in him. But he also taught me that I'm stronger than I knew, that justice is possible, and that protecting yourself from abuse is not betraying love. The judge sentenced Kevin to 3 years in federal prison plus 5 years probation. Amber received 8 years due to her leadership role and pattern of similar crimes across state lines. Both were ordered to pay full restitution plus punitive damages to all their victims. Mr. Walker, the judge said directly to Kevin, you targeted the person who loved you most in the world and exploited that love for financial gain. Your crimes represent a fundamental betrayal of trust that strikes at the heart of family relationships. This sentence reflects not just the monetary damage you caused, but the emotional and psychological trauma you inflicted on your own mother. Kevin was led away in shackles, finally facing real consequences for his crimes. As I watched him disappear through the courtroom doors, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of justice finally served. The nightmare was over. My son would serve his time, pay his debt, and hopefully learn that actions have consequences. But more importantly, other families would be protected from Kevin and Amber's crimes. The prosecution had dismantled their operation and sent a clear message that elder abuse carries serious penalties. My decision to fight back had protected not just myself, but other vulnerable people who might have been their next targets. Justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about prevention, protection, and the radical act of refusing to be a victim. The first months after Kevin's sentencing were strange and difficult in ways I hadn't expected. The house that had felt violated and empty during his theft now felt too quiet, echoing with memories of the son I thought I'd known. Some days I missed him so intensely that I considered writing to him in prison. Other days I felt only relief that he couldn't hurt me anymore. Therapy helped me understand that grief and justice could coexist. Dr. Elizabeth Patterson specialized in family trauma and elder abuse recovery. She helped me process the complex emotions of loving someone who'd betrayed me so completely. Dorothy, you're mourning the death of your relationship with Kevin while also celebrating your survival of his abuse. Both feelings are valid and necessary. The financial recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. Between the restitution orders, the bank settlement, and the civil lawsuit damages, I received over $30,000. Enough to pay off my mortgage, replace my furniture with pieces I truly loved, and establish an emergency fund that would protect me from future financial manipulation. I kept Gerald's chair. The court had recovered it from the quick sale company Kevin had sold it to, and having it back felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity that had been stolen. I placed it in the living room where it belonged, next to a new bookshelf filled with stories of other women who'd survived and thrived after betrayal. Helen Rodriguez became more than a neighbor, she became family in the truest sense. We discovered that shared trauma had created a bond stronger than blood relationships. Helen understood the particular pain of being betrayed by someone you'd raised and loved unconditionally. Our weekly coffee meetings became mutual therapy sessions that healed us both. Dorothy, you know what the difference is between family by blood and family by choice? Helen asked during one of our conversations. Family by choice keeps earning the relationship every day. They don't just assume love gives them the right to hurt you. The support group Sandra had introduced me to became a central part of my healing process. Meeting other elder abuse survivors taught me that my experience, while devastating, was unfortunately common. Adult children stealing from elderly parents, romantic partners manipulating vulnerable seniors, even professional caregivers exploiting the people they were supposed to protect. But I also learned that recovery and justice were possible. Members of our group had successfully prosecuted family members, recovered stolen assets, and rebuilt their lives after systematic abuse. Their stories gave me hope that I could do the same. My relationship with my sister Beverly required careful reconstruction. Beverly had genuinely believed Kevin's lies about my mental decline, but she'd also failed to investigate his claims or listen to my side of the story. Rebuilding trust required her acknowledgement of those failures and her commitment to supporting me going forward. Dorothy, I'm sorry I doubted you, Beverly said during one of our reconciliation conversations. Kevin was so convincing, and the evidence he showed us looked real. But I should have talked to you directly instead of just accepting his version of events. Frank's involvement in the conspiracy earned him criminal charges as well, though lighter than Kevin's. His marriage to Beverly ended when she realized the extent of his participation in my abuse. I can't stay married to someone who helped steal from my sister, she explained. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. The community response to my story was overwhelmingly positive once the full truth emerged. Neighbors who'd believed Kevin's lies about my mental health apologized and offered support. Mrs. Patterson brought homemade cookies and a sheepish admission that she'd been manipulated by Kevin's fake concerns. Dorothy, I feel terrible about doubting you, she said, standing on my front porch with tears in her eyes. Kevin was so convincing when he called to report your strange behavior. I thought I was helping by keeping an eye on you. The local bank implemented new procedures for elderly customers based on lessons learned from Kevin's exploitation of my accounts. Other businesses in town began training employees to recognize signs of elder abuse and respond appropriately. My case had created positive changes that would protect other vulnerable people. Speaking engagements became an unexpected part of my new life. Community centers, senior groups, and law enforcement agencies invited me to share my story and educate others about elder abuse prevention. These presentations were emotionally challenging but deeply meaningful. The most important thing I learned, I would tell audiences, is that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Accepting abuse is not family loyalty. And fighting back against criminals is not betraying love, even when those criminals are your own children. The response to these presentations was always intense. Other victims approached me afterwards to share their stories and ask for advice. Adult children thanked me for helping them recognize warning signs in their own families. Law enforcement officers requested copies of my evidence to use in training programs. My decision to maintain limited contact with Kevin while he served his sentence was controversial even among my support group. Some members felt I should cut all ties completely, while others supported my choice to leave the door open for genuine rehabilitation and reconciliation. Kevin's letters from prison were initially full of self-pity and attempts at manipulation. He claimed the prison environment was unfair, and suggested that his prosecution had been excessive. He asked me to contact his lawyer about appealing his sentence and to send money for commissary items. I responded once, clearly and firmly, Kevin, I will not help you avoid the consequences of your crimes. If you want any relationship with me in the future, you need to take responsibility for what you did and demonstrate genuine change. I wish you well, but I will not be manipulated again. His subsequent letters showed gradual but meaningful change. He began acknowledging the harm he'd caused and expressing genuine remorse for his actions. He participated in prison therapy programs and took responsibility for his choices. The letters became less frequent but more authentic. Creating a memorial corner for Gerald felt like reclaiming the sacred space Kevin had violated when he sold our family belongings. I displayed Gerald's military medals, our wedding photo, and other recovered personal items. The corner became a place of peace and remembrance, protected now by security systems and legal boundaries Kevin could never cross again. The financial security I'd achieved through the legal process allowed me to make improvements to my home that felt like acts of defiance against Kevin's attempts to force me into assisted living. New furniture, updated security systems, fresh paint, and a beautiful garden that proclaimed my intention to stay exactly where I belonged. But the most profound change was internal. The frightened, confused woman who'd walked into an empty house 2 years ago had become someone entirely different. Strong, informed, protected, and determined never to be anyone's victim again. I'd learned to trust my instincts, protect my boundaries, and fight back against injustice. The wisdom I'd gained came at a terrible price, but it was real and valuable. I understood now the difference between love and manipulation, between family loyalty and enabling abuse, between forgiveness and accountability. These lessons had cost me my relationship with my son, but they'd saved my life and dignity. On quiet evenings, sitting in Gerald's recovered chair and looking around my restored home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete safety. Kevin could no longer hurt me. Amber was in prison where she belonged. My finances were secure, my home was protected, and my boundaries were clear. The future held uncertainty, as all futures do. Kevin would eventually be released from prison, and I would have to decide whether reconciliation was possible or wise. Other challenges would arise, as they do for everyone. But I faced that future as someone fundamentally different than the woman I'd been before this nightmare began. I'd learned that love without boundaries enables abuse. That family relationships require mutual respect to be healthy. That protecting yourself from harm is not selfish or disloyal. And that justice, while sometimes painful, is necessary for healing and growth. Most importantly, I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Strong enough to survive betrayal, fight back against criminals, rebuild my life, and help other victims find their own strength. That knowledge was worth more than any furniture Kevin could have stolen, more valuable than any money Amber could have taken. I was Dorothy Walker, 55 years old, survivor of elder abuse, advocate for justice, and proof that it's never too late to refuse to be anyone's victim. My son had tried to steal my life, but instead, he'd taught me how truly strong I could be. Have you or someone you know experienced something similar with family members taking advantage of trust and love? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how families can protect themselves from these devastating betrayals. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real family drama stories where justice actually wins. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's possible to fight back and rebuild after even the worst family betrayals. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that seeking help and fighting for justice isn't betraying family, it's protecting yourself and others from harm. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never let anyone convince you that love means accepting abuse.